Hello.
Is this Josh?
Yes, it is.
What's up, man?
Hey,
Bobby.
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Very good.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do this interview. It is a tremendous honor to be able to do this interview with you. My 200th interview overall, being able to talk about the brand new Fates Warning album coming out on July 1st through Inside Out.
Cool. Very cool, man.
So, first and foremost, how did you approach the brand new album?
Ooh, I'm not sure how I approached it. Basically, most of the songs, Jim sent me the songs as he sort of was finalizing them. And some of them had vocalists, some of them had vocals on them, some of them didn't. And he sends me, how he does that is he sends me like he'll program drums or whatever, and I'll listen to the programming of whatever he came up with, and sometimes if I think something sounds close in my head to what I'm hearing for the riff, I'll sort of stay on that track, and sometimes I'll hear something and I say, ooh, maybe this will be cool, rather than what he programmed, and sometimes I'll do that. So I think it just depends on, the song a little bit. Sometimes I'll listen to what he came up with just for a second, and I don't want that to influence how I hear the riff or the drums, accompanying whatever, the guitars or what the bass is doing, and sometimes I'll just start out on my own. But I think it's more just kind of like feeling it, listening to it, and, definitely this record has a little bit heavier edge, and I think that you can hear that in the riffs, and then you can hear that also in the drumming. And then there is one of the songs from the Rooftops, which I came up with all the drumming basically first and sent it to Jim, and he wrote around that song. So I think it varies a little bit on the song, and varies on, just what I'm hearing in my head, and kind of just trying different things on the kit until I come up with something that I think really works, or it sounds cool, or it sounds memorable, or something.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I've definitely been hearing that as a fellow drummer myself, being able to listen to all the great stuff that you're doing on the brand new album. I know most people have just gotten to hear from the Rooftops, but when they get a chance to hear the rest of the album and all of the great stuff that you put onto record this time around, I think they're going to be thoroughly impressed with the job that you've done.
Thanks. So you've got the record.
Oh, yes, and I honestly gotta say it's probably my favorite Fates Warning album since Parallels, which is saying a lot for me, with Fates Warning being one of my favorite bands.
Cool, man. Yeah, that's great, man. I really dig the record also. I mean, I dig it sort of as, on the drumming side of it, and I love the songs. I love what Ray and Jim did, creating the song, the melodies, and all that sort of stuff. So, all of us are pretty proud of this one.
Yeah, it's definitely a great album to be proud of. And, of course, when you guys are going to be able to tour behind the record as well, I think the songs are really going to translate live as well.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's funny because I can hear the points, like when you record something or whatever, you hear, so the dynamics go up, here or there, but they don't, sometimes things don't translate as much on a record because just the way it, records are a little bit, you're not feeling the full, dimensions of when you seeing a band live. So, I think the songs are going to be amazing live also.
No, it seems funny to me because I know that you were sending the songs back and forth to each other to get the idea of how to write the songs, but really it sounds like you guys just went into the studio and just worked together on creating these songs from scratch, because it just sounds so unbelievably tight together. And with that, I mean, just the songwriting is so great, and all of you guys are just in top form on this album.
Well, thanks. I think this is the third record that I've done with Jim. We did the Archmatheus record together, and then we did Darkness in a Different Light 3 years ago, I guess, and it was, and then now this is the third one. And, just playing together, I guess, over the last, 9 years, and then also working on the records together, it's, I think it kind of like, it goes through a process of, getting to know each other as players and that sort of thing. But, with that said, too, there were times when, as you're working on stuff where I'm hearing things a little different than Jim is hearing things, and we have to go back and forth until we kind of get things finalized as far as how the parts work together. And sometimes it's weird because there's different layers of what accents that I'm playing off of the bass and what accents I'm playing off the guitar. And sometimes it's like at certain points I'm playing off the guitar more, and sometimes I'm playing off the bass more. And I think it just makes a little deeper record to do it that way rather than following the riff completely. And so I think we kind of like established something like a little bit of new ground, making the record just a well-rounded but deeper record rather than very sort of everything is like every beat that the guitar is playing, the drums play, or the drums, the bass is playing or something. And I think that happens a lot with metals, but I think that this record has much more than that.
And I think that's what I gravitate towards so much because of the album, because it does have that different kind of approach to it, especially from a drummer's perspective, being able to hear those nuances and not just doing what would stereotypically be played behind a riff, like any of them on the album. Just the way that you're approaching it differently like that and trying those different nuances, I think it really adds the album to make it even fresher than it is.
Yeah. Well, it's time consuming to sit down and, to kind of go through all that. But yeah, it definitely comes out better. I've never been a drummer that, like when somebody like plays a riff for me or plays a rhythm and, like they'll play something like, something very sort of typical. I will never just go, I'll find some way to break that up over the kit, and use different voices or accent some of the beats and maybe leave some notes out. But it's a long process that you go through of trying something, and then, if I'm in my studio working the parts out, then I'll kind of listen back to it and I'll say, that's not right. This needs to be tweaked a little bit, and then I'll tweak one or two notes here or there, and then I'll kind of go through this whole process of maybe finding two or three different things that kind of work and then choosing the best one or whatever. But I think that's, the more analytical players, and I come sort of from that Neil Peart sort of Terry Bozzio school when I was young of how to, play drums and how to approach drums and working on something that's progressive or rock or metal or whatever. That's sort of my approach, and that kind of carries over into this day. I still have that. That's, my approach is trying a bunch of different things and then trying to come up with the part that really makes it stand out.
And that's what makes it more fun to listen to as a listener, being able to not just hear the stereotypical beat behind it, but to hear different ideas, and also with drummers listening to it, being able to hopefully become inspired to try different things as well, rather than just doing the standard double bass driven single hi-hat hits, but like
right.
Your approach, going and trying different parts around the kit and just coming up with fresh new ideas like that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's from, the sort of the school I came from. It's drumming, my background, and it definitely carries over. I mean, I like playing improvisational, also, which, if the situation lends itself to that, I'll do that. But this is definitely, this is more of a thought out, everything needs to find its place in the mix and its place within the music. So I think that's what made me, work with the guys so well at the beginning when I started with the band in 2007. Is we're all coming from the same place,
So, was there any moments on the album that were challenging for you to create something, or is it become natural at this point?
No, I mean, there definitely was some challenging parts. I know there was one song where I came up with a bunch of stuff, for one of the songs, and Jim thought it should go in a little bit of a different direction, and I kind of had to regroup and think about some of the parts and where it was going to, what he was hearing. So sometimes it doesn't always work itself out, but I think once you kind of hit on one thing, you establish the verse of here's how the verse is, here's how I'm hearing the verse, and then it kind of like it lifts to the chorus or the pre-chorus or whatever, and then parts sort of kind of like they find their way. And I think that's there was a couple of challenging things that did happen. But anytime you have anything, that you do anything that requires time and patience and stuff like that, there are always those challenges. I mean, I faced that also with my brother. When we're working on the spastic ink stuff, where it's more challenging the music, the more variables that there are going to be, and then the more of the little bit of like one guy saying I hear it like this, and another guy's like I hear it like this. So it's not always an easy road, but it's a lot more rewarding when it comes out and everybody's happy with it.
Oh, very much so, and of course it helps with your creativity as well, coming up with different ideas like that, because when it takes a while for someone to learn something, they're able to incorporate that more and come up with new ideas in the future.
Sure. Yeah, I have these concepts that I work on, when I was early on in my playing, if I'm, when I sit behind a kit and I'm trying to think of different things to practice, and these concepts that I work on sort of kind of give me the facility around the kit to do some of those things and come up with different ideas. And so that's kind of one of the ways that when I'm not working on something, if I'm not working on something specific, like a song for a band or, learning songs for a live show, I just work on these concepts, and it kind of lends me to have a little more facility around the kit for whatever I might want to come up with.
So with those concepts, are you able to divulge a little more into that, like specifically for the new album with the concepts for creating ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I know that sounds kind of vague if I just say concepts, but there's certain things that I've like, say for instance, inverted doubles. That's something that I've been doing for a few years, that I started doing just out of basic patterns of, trying to come off a tom and then go into like a snare, like a roll, like a double stroke roll, but inverting it or whatever. And that's a concept that I learned for one specific thing, coming off a tom and then going straight to doubles on the snare. But then I found out I could start doing that, coming up with patterns between the right cymbal and the hi-hat. And so it's weird, but when you have that ability or whatever, and then somebody presents you with like if it's a song, a riff, or whatever, and then I'm trying to create a sound that I hear in my head, and it's like I kind of go towards the ride and the hi-hat or something, and I'm playing like trying to come up with something, and then I'll find that those doubles work well, doing it that way on this particular riff, if it's accenting part of the riff or whatever it might be. So those are the things that kind of where an exercise maybe can lend itself to being a really cool drumming part. It starts out as an exercise, or maybe one thing that I specifically had to learn to do to create a fill or something that I wanted to do in a song, and then I just kind of keep developing it. It's just like a vocabulary, just having a bigger vocabulary on the drum. I know it all sounds vague. It's something that I'd have to sit down on the kit and say, here's how it goes, that kind of thing.
Oh, but that does sound fantastic, though. I mean, it's always different for other people because some people become natural at things differently than others, and that's the great thing about learning new challenges when it comes to music, is opening your eyes to different ideas. And just like you were talking about with the inverted doubles is something that I've been starting to work on as well, and hearing you talk about that, it's just like it's helping me kind of approach that when I get behind my kit again, and being able to look at things a little differently, since that's not something I'm not too familiar with yet.
Yeah, I plan to do in the past, I've done these sort of like in the studio things on my YouTube channel, where I have video footage of me recording the tracks. If it was at the Carriage House, where I did Arch Matthias record, or when I did the Darkness in a Different Light record. I did those in the studio segment. But this time around, I plan to do more of a little bit of an analysis of some of the things and some of the parts, and why I came up with the parts on the songs and how I did. And I think that would be, for drummers, it's going to be more interesting than watching a guy play through a song and saying, "Oh, he's great," or "Cool, man." I think it's going to be kind of a better way of kind of explaining something. It's just something different that I haven't done yet. And I think that I'm going to get around to doing that at some point when this record comes out. And probably for the next few months after the record's out.
Oh, very cool. Definitely be looking forward to that when that gets released.
Yeah.
So, have you had to change your setup at all for the recording of the new album?
No, I pretty much used the same setup that I used on Darkness in a Different Light. I recently added the little cymbal stack, which is two 10-inch cymbals right on top of each other. I've always stuck pretty much to the 10, 12, 14, 16 toms and 4 crashes, 2 chinas. Obviously, when I do something like the Fates Warning stuff as opposed to Sebastian Bach, when I do Fates Warning, the splashes come out, and I'm more into using those, and then the cymbal stack. The only thing it's difficult sometimes. Sometimes I would like to add more voices to the kit, but I'm already using so many cymbals and that sort of thing. And then sometimes when you go overseas and you have to get all this extra stuff and take extra stuff, to recreate the same things that you did on record, it ends up being more of a hassle than it ends up being, just getting all the extra stuff and bringing all the extra stuff, and that sort of thing. It's a little more difficult.
And does that make it hard if you're not able to get all that extra equipment? Are you still able to play those songs correctly in your mind?
Yeah, you just have to sort of revise them a little bit. It's kind of like what I do on the Fates Warning stuff that Mark Zonder played on. Like his setup is, when we're doing those songs live, I obviously, if he has a cymbal or a couple of cymbals that are different sounding, I have to think, okay, that cymbal doesn't sound exactly like a china, it doesn't sound exactly like a crash, what is it? And I say, well, I'm either going to play it on the crash, or I'll play it on the china, or, whatever sounds he might have. If it's an electronic drum, if it's a kind of like like one of those 808 kind of sounds, like a doom or something, then I'll just use the floor tom or whatever, rather than having the electronic. And I think all of that stuff has to be a little adaptable, when you're playing live, especially like if you're doing night after night, playing in various different venues and that sort of stuff. And I'm not able to take, suitcases and extra cases of this or that, Sometimes you have to strip things down a little bit. So it's just, it's the nature of the touring and how that works when you go, and especially going overseas, just with luggage and, and baggage charges and stuff like that. It's just the nature of, playing music and traveling.
Oh, very much so. And since you did bring it up about, of course, with the Mark Zonder style of drumming, how have you been able to approach playing the older material as opposed to putting your own spin on the newer material? And is it much of a challenge for you to go back to those older albums, or are you able to do that naturally?
Well, when I started working on the fake stuff, I found that obviously there was a lot more when I first learned the fake stuff, and still, if we pick up one of the older songs from the catalog, it's definitely, there's more fingers, more wrists involved. My background as far as live has been more, Halford and, playing with Sebastian and Riot and that sort of thing. But my whole drumming changes a little bit, and I rely more on, the more progressive roots that I have, working with my brother on the really progressive stuff, that sort of thing. So, it's weird because I notice that I'm doing more fingers and more wrists than I am full arms, So my playing changes a little bit. But even with the older Fates Warning stuff that we're doing in the set, I change a few things here and there. Like if for some reason, if I hear something that Mark played and I was just like, well, that's stylistically, that's a little different than what I would play. And I think I did that more when I joined the band. I felt like I needed to do more of me. So I listened to a song like Monument, for instance, and there's this drum soloing stuff at the end of the song, at Monument on that song. And for some reason, when I learned the song, I wasn't that into playing exactly what he played on that. So I just decided at that point, that's sort of like it's a drum solo at the end, playing, not so much a solo, but playing a little over the top of the riffs. And so I just said, I'm going to create something of my own on that, and so I did. And I've done that in a few different places where it just seems more more appropriate for me. So I stick to the things that Mark created if they're really sort of signature. But every once in a while, I have those places where I kind of do a little bit of what I feel is more me. You know, I'm not into really, you know, imitating or duplicating what somebody else has done. I feel like the band is sort of, you know, we're players first, and if we stick to those signature parts, anything that we do that's more of ourselves, kind of, you know, it makes the song a little cool, makes it more, you know, personal. So I've done that for some reason with the band. It's not even a conscious, I mean, it's not a fully thought out thing. It's almost like when I hear the songs, and when I started working on the Fate stuff for the live shows, I was just like, I'm going to do something a little different here. You know, it wasn't even like I didn't go back and forth. Should I not? I didn't even do that. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do something that's more me right here. So.
And I think it's really important as a drummer, too, to have your own identity. I mean, it's one thing to be able to play a record you didn't record note for note, but it's another thing to be able to create something else from it as well, and being able to have your own identity. And you definitely have that as well.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been fortunate to play with some bands that allow me to do that. You know, I mean, had I been, you know, in a band that plays, you know, more straight music, or more music that's more sort of dictated by a style, then maybe I would have to do that. I mean, even when I was playing with Riot, you know, and the song has a lot of, if it's just straight double bass, you know, most of the way through, you know, doing a tick-a-tack, you know, sometimes that, you know, that gets to the point where I have to find some way to do something within that to have a little bit of something else to me rather than, you know, just the basic part, you know, that sort of everybody else would play or whatever. And I don't want to I never try to step too far out of the boundaries of the music, because there is a, you know, you can step too far out, you know, and then make the music not sound appropriate, or to make the drums sound appropriate to the music. But I think that there's times where you can find some way to make it just a little cooler, you know, a little hipper or something, rather than doing something very generic, you know, without sounding that you're doing something inappropriate at the same time. So it's, you know, but with Fate's Warning, it's just like it's completely open, you know. And one of the things Jim does that's really cool is when he sends me programming of whatever the riff might be or the song. There's a lot of stuff coming in and out, you know, like there'll be like a basic kick pattern, a snare and hi-hat or whatever, and then there'll be random toms in here or there, or maybe, you know, like crashes in different places or whatever. And it kind of leaves me thinking, you know what, he's not hearing one specific thing. He's hearing, and I think to myself when I hear his programming, I say, he's hearing it, I listen to more like, he's hearing this part busy, or he's hearing this part sparse, you know? And that's kind of like, I can go wherever, you know, on the kit, as long as I don't, you know, play too busy for one section or too sparse for one other section. Or, you know, like if I hear there's, you know, a lot of double bass, I'm thinking, okay, he's hearing a lot of double bass. Not necessarily exactly what he programmed, but he's hearing that underneath the riff. So there is that sort of thing where I do have a lot of freedom, you know, versus some of the things that some of the bands and some of the other people I've worked with, sometimes they'll send me a loop, like a 1-bar loop, and it'll play that same loop throughout the whole song. And that's frustrating, because I know that when guitar players program things as a loop, they sort of hear things, they hear that same rhythm over and over and over and over. And if you change that, then they start to feel like, oh, you changed my loop, you know? And it's like, well, I'm not going to play that same loop for 4 minutes, you know? It's not going to work. So that's the great thing about working with a band like Fate's Warning is, you know, the freedom to, you know, explore around the drum kit and do something interesting for, you know, for me as a drummer.
Oh, very much so. I mean, having that freedom is so important. And of course, with your impressive resume with all of the bands that you've worked with and currently still work with, do you find that all a challenge at all when you're going into more simpler music as opposed to the stuff that you may be more known for, working with your brother and Fate's Warning and all of that stuff?
You know, actually, I mean, I think it would depend depend on the music. Like, say, for instance, I play a lot of country music when I'm at home. You know, I do sessions and stuff like that. I don't know if you knew that about me or whatever, but I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and I love country music and I play a lot of it. But to me, the focus in country music is completely different than it is in you know, progressive rock or metal or whatever. And I am perfectly fine with just playing with the music, what that music requires, you know. And when I'm doing sessions, doing that kind of music, I want to play the basic and most appropriate parts for that particular music. So, and I think it's important to have those outlets. If I played in one band, I think, you know, and I've seen this happen where guys that play with one band, they want to do everything they can with that one band in that one song or in that one set, even if it's not appropriate. And I think that's it. Having those outlets sort of gives me, you know, when I move from, you know, doing from Fate's Warning to playing a country gig, I don't feel that need to do anything that I did in Fate's Warning when I'm playing, you know, something else. So it's, you know, one definitely helps the other. And then if I'm playing a lot of really basic music or whatever, then when I, you know, move to Fate's Warning, it's kind of like, wow, you know, I get this freedom, you know, it's cool, you know, whatever. So, and then the other thing is different styles of music, whether it's country or whatever, it allows me to focus on my time more and my groove and my patterns and making something that's very simple sound really sort of natural and flowing, you know, and tight, you know, but flowing at the same time. So there's, you know, one side of drumming helps the other side, I think.
Oh, very much so. And that is fantastic. I did not realize that you were drumming on country albums, and I think that's fantastic for creativity as well, because when you're playing music that you're not necessarily known for or maybe grew up on, or depending on the situation for a different drummer, being able to explore those different territories is always good for the soul. And much like you said, not having to do everything in just one band, but when you're able to go into a different project, you have a different appropriate mentality that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, that's basically what it's all about.
So when you're doing those country albums, is it more of the modern country that's going on now, or is it more of the classic country? I'm curious on that.
Well, I would say it's more traditional, just because in San Antonio, Texas, it's more known for, you know, the traditional style, you know, of music versus like what they're doing maybe in Nashville and in LA and different places with country. But there is a little bit, you know, like a modern element, but I would say for the most part it is more traditional. And but yeah, in the sessions, you know, they vary anywhere from me, you know, just getting a chart when I walk in and, you know, listening to a demo and then going for it. And sometimes I'll get a demo, you know, like in like an MP3s, you know, or something like that through email for the session, and the session, you know, the session's next Monday or whatever. Here's the 5 songs we're going to do, and I'll listen to them and I'll say, okay. Sometimes it'll be a full demo track of somebody else that's recorded a song already, or sometimes it'll just be an acoustic guitar and a guy, you know, singing a song and playing acoustic, and I'll have to sort of visualize of what I think the drumming should go and that sort of thing. And then when we get together in the studio for the session, then I'll talk with the bass player and the other guys and session leader, and we'll sit there and kind of sort it out and say, well, what do you think? How should the song develop here? Should I come in on the front? Should I wait until, you know, the pre-chorus and then come in lightly, and then, you know, it turns into that, you know, where it's, you know, collaborating with other guys.
Yeah, and that's a great way to do it too. I mean, of course, with some bands, they're never able to really collaborate in person. They gotta send files through the internet, especially in 2016, but again, going into different territories with music and being able to just talk about the way the direction can go in a recording like that. I mean, again, that's just really cool to be able to see the different sides of your playing in different genres of music.
Yeah, I mean, that is typical old school way to do it, you know, and that's, you know, that's the way guys did it years ago, you know, whether you're doing, even in, you know, like in a rehearsal room with a band, you know, which doesn't really happen anymore. Where guys sit in a room together and play. But that's the basic form of how those sort of sessions go. Which it's cool. It's like what I grew up with. I mean, I know it's probably some guys would think it's very strange. Like a lot of the newer guys maybe. But that's I mean, there was a time where we used to record records and we used to play from the very beginning of the song to the very end. I mean, that even is odd now. To start a song and play it all the way through. Nobody does that anymore. No.
Well, to me,
I shouldn't say nobody. I should say it's very few are doing that still.
Oh yeah, and I've noticed whenever I've recorded, it always felt unnatural to me to have to stop at a spot. The only reason I would ever stop is so if I made a mistake in the recording, that way I could go back to the beginning and try to play it all the way through, because I imagine with drumming, it feels kind of unnatural to have to start and stop in a recording session rather than just being able to play it all the way through.
It is. I mean, I still have to get used to it. I find sometimes my volume will slightly change, like if I start tracking something and I'm doing a part, like if I'm doing, verses or something, and I'm doing like a bunch of verses or whatever, and then I get to the chorus and I'm saying, okay, now I'm going to do the choruses. I do things in sections like that. I find by the time I get to the choruses, my volume has changed a little bit. My volume has gotten a little louder and this and that, and it's in a way it is more difficult to do that way because I didn't grow up doing it that way. Plus, the other thing that's weird is, locking yourself into sort of the song, into a pocket of the song. Once you start recording something, once you're at the very beginning, you feel it as the beginning, and then you feel the song develop a little bit, and then you're locking in with the click track or whatever, and then you kind of get to the end and it sort of peaks or whatever it might do. Then that sort of, it makes it like a full story, It's kind of like, if you don't, sometimes it feels like, you're writing the story in different, you're writing the beginning, then you're writing the end, then you're writing the middle, then it's a little harder that way. But, just with the state of the industry and the way things are done, that's the way, things are done, and that's the quicker way these days of getting things, done, is to do things in pieces like that, and to make them more perfect, and that's what people are used to listening to is, things that are more perfect rather than, a guy starting from front to back and maybe having a few mistakes here and there, and that should be okay too,
Yeah, I definitely agree. I prefer the more human-sounding albums rather than just making everything clean and perfect, because it is those imperfections that make everything more relatable as a musician and a listener, whether it's the lyrics or drum parts or whatever the case is. Being able to have that real natural feel to it. And that's what I've always appreciated about your drumming as well, because I can tell that you take that aspect of it, and whether you do have to do it in parts like you mentioned, or being able to play it from start to finish, I still feel that very natural, organic sound when you play.
Oh, thanks. I think it comes from, like coming from just the older school, the way of doing things. I did a record years ago where after I got finished playing on the record, the engineer quantized everything, put it to the grid, and he did it in 45 minutes. And I was like, ugh, I couldn't believe it. I was like, why would you do that? But that's what they wanted, and to me, it's not the way, records should sound, but a lot of them do sound that way. So, I mean, I just come from an older school, playing and doing it, like whatever my, feel is. And if things, move slightly here or there, then that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. I don't need, that sort of everything to be lined up,
Oh, very much so. And again, that's why I've always gravitated towards your drumming, no matter what band that you've been a part of and what album I've heard you play on. Being able to hear that has inspired me to come up with that kind of playing that you are known for, being able to just make the song sound like you and having that great personality behind it inspires me, and I know it's inspired so many drummers out there as well to be able to find their own identity like you have.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, no problem. Well, once again, thank you for taking the time to do this interview. It's been a tremendous honor to be able to talk to you about Fates Warning and all of the other projects that you have going on in the past. Is there anything?
Cool, man.
Is there any other projects on the horizon or any new releases in the near future that you want to talk about?
No, not at the moment. You know, I just got off the road with Sebastian Bach. I did a bunch of touring with him during the summer, and right now I'm just relaxing and taking it easy and doing some gardening and hanging around the house. So that's my plan right now.